All right. I hereby call the February 23rd meeting of the Public Works Committee to order. Would the council please call the roll?
Brewski,
Here.
O'Brien,
Present.
Bergdorf,
Present.
Cleary,
Present.
Fine,
Here.
Hurley,
Here.
Peter,
Here.
Reinhardt,
Here.
and Smith.
Here.
All present, Mr. Chairman.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. Our first item is to approve the previous meeting's minutes. Can I get a motion on that?
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Peter, second by Mr. O'Brien. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. All right, that passes unanimously. Moving on to our first piece of business, item number 2 is authorizing a lease agreement with MVP Health regarding the corporate suite 17 at the Times Union Center.
Hi, this is Jennifer Chaffee. I'm filling in for Bob Bilber. He was at a press conference for the new NLL announcement. So MVP wants to move from Suite 13 as a 50% owner to Suite 17 as a 100% owner.
Good.
Okay.
And it would go into effect once the arena is open with events.
I'll make a motion to move it.
I'd like to make a
Motion
second.
to move, second by Mr. Peter. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. All right, that carries. And then I understand that Mr. Belber released some financial statements today. Is that right?
Well, we had sent the financial statements for January out a few weeks ago. I don't know if you have them.
I don't have I don't believe that they're on our devices, are they?
Sure, they're on everyone's devices. If
Okay.
you look in the minutes, following the minutes, there are the 2 documents. That's where they're located on the tablets for the members.
Okay, there we go. Financial statement, gotcha. Okay, so would everyone just giving a maybe 60-second just high level of where we are? It looks like, so our actual current year we're down. This is in millions, or this is in thousands?
Are you looking at January?
Yes, ma'am. I think this is the January 2021 public statement. Yeah.
For the arena and the parking garage, right? So the month of January came in at a loss of 209,000 versus the budgeted loss of 288,000. We are trying to we haven't brought back any of our furloughed employees yet. That wouldn't come into effect until we start having events, and trying to keep our expenses as tight as possible.
Okay. Gotcha. Any questions from the members on this before we move on? All right. Seeing none, let's go to item number 3. Thank you for that. Authorizing an agreement with Saratoga Railroad Engineering, PC, regarding the design and construction of inspection services, the Boeresville Rail Crossing Quiet Zone. I believe you are on mute.
Me?
No.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I
Hi.
can.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that.
all
Yes,
right.
the Department of Public Works is requesting approval to enter into an agreement with Saratoga Railroad Engineering for design and construction inspection services for the Boeresville Quiet Zone. We received 3 proposals for the project, and our engineering staff reviewed the proposals and are recommending the award go to Saratoga Engineering. They have extensive experience in designing quiet zones throughout our state and actually throughout the US. Their total contract amount is not to exceed $131,440.
Okay. Any questions on this, members? Mr. Reinhardt.
Yeah, I have a couple. First, Lisa, does this work include the actual construction or just the inspection of the construction?
So it includes the design and the construction inspection, and the estimate is There's no telling how long it's going to take for construction. It really depends on, we're at the mercy of the railroad. And this company made an estimate of potentially, 6 weeks of construction at X number of dollars per week. And, so the inspection cost is based on that. It's likely going to be less than that. We don't know if there's going to need to be any alterations to the roadway geometry in order to make the gates run efficiently. So they threw in as part of the estimate cost for doing some roadway geometry work that may or may not need to happen. So I suspect that this estimate is actually high for, I don't think we're going to need to utilize everything that they put in here. We made the RFP though include pretty much anything that we could potentially run into so that we would have a price for everything and make sure that it wouldn't go over the cost.
Now then, this quote, which you think might be higher than ultimately it turns out to be, does not include construction. And will that construction be done by CSX?
So how it works is construction. So our design engineer, Saratoga Rail, will put together an actual design. That design has to go to CSX's engineer, Bergman, who reviews our design on behalf of CSX and make sure it's, acceptable in their estimation. So they review it. Then our engineer comes up with an estimate of cost of what they think it's going to cost to construct. Then we'll know if we have enough money left in our budget to actually do the construction. I suspect there probably isn't going to be enough money in the budget. The original grant amount was for $340,000. So that remains to be seen, but the construction will actually happen by a contractor that CSX picks because it's their railroad and they're responsible for, the construction. So our engineer will oversee that though.
Okay. Now, when you say that we have a grant that we think will cover the construction cost, that's money that's outside of this 131.
Yeah, the original grant from DASNY was in the amount of $340,000.
Right. Okay. So that money, some of that money is going towards this work, and then some of it will be going towards the construction?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, one last question. The contract term for this agreement is 18 months. Does that mean that we anticipate that the actual construction of the quiet zone will be completed on or before December of 22?
Yes.
Can I somehow send off fireworks or something to say that thank God we're finally there?
I think that's warranted. I would say that's warranted.
I have a lot of constituents out that way who are going to be really happy to hear this news.
Yes. Yeah. I know they are. I keep getting calls and it seems that it's going to be a very welcome project. So I can hear the trains at night even in the morning, 5 a.m. myself. So
are you still on Carstead?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I hear them too, and I'm farther away than you are. So
yeah. Yep. So that's funny.
Yeah.
Very faint, but it's it's okay.
It's just, for me, it's just a gentle reminder that the project hasn't been completed yet.
Tis true. Yep.
All right. Well, anyway, thanks. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I have.
You're welcome.
I thought Mr. Peter had his hand up.
Bill sort of got all my questions answered, so I'd like to make a motion to move this.
I have a
Motion.
question, please.
We'll first get to Mr. Bergdorf. We'll go back to the motion. Mr. Bergdorf.
Yes, I think Lisa touched on this in an 18-month construction period. Has the vendor agreed to hold their prices if by any chance you go beyond an 18-month construction period, or would we be subject to a change order?
That is a good question. And I have not asked that question. So what I'll do is I'll find out the answer to it and I will get back to you.
Okay. Well, do we actually have a contract here, or is that something you could work with the county attorney's office to massage into a contract?
We don't have the contract yet. The contract is pending, approval here. And once we get approval, then we actually draft the contract. So that can be put into the contract.
Okay, I think that would be a good idea if you would look into that.
Will do.
All
Thank
right.
you, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Grimm, is this a question or is this a motion?
No, a question, yeah.
Question from Mr. Grimm.
Yeah, I'm looking over the contract and it's not really clear to me when you say quiet zone, what are we expecting other than to try to make things more quiet? We're doing a number of things like gate locations, gate length, timing based. What exactly in a nutshell do we plan to do to make it quiet?
What's going to happen is gates are going to be installed and there's going to be a mechanism that triggers the gates to go down a certain amount of time in advance of the train crossing the roadway. So rather than having to blow their horn in advance of crossing the roadway, the gates will be down and that will prevent cars and pedestrians from crossing. So it's a matter of designing, getting a gate timing, designing the gates, their locations, the length, and whatnot.
All right, so it's the horn that drives people crazy. You're just
Yeah.
using technology then just to make it safe, but also eliminate the noise when you can, basically?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Peter.
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Reinhardt. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Oh, that carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, is authorizing agreements with Direct Energy Business regarding the supply of natural gas to various county facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Energy Advisory Group, we are requesting authorization to use the Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance Program for the purchase of natural gas from Direct Energy. This would be for various county buildings. It's actually 2 contracts. The first contract would be the accounts utilizing fixed daily pricing. The contract term would be from November 1st, 2023 through October 31st of 2024. And the price would be $3.539 per decatherm, compared to the current rate of $4.77 per decatherm. The estimated savings to the county would be $127,523. The second contract is for the monthly pricing. The contract term would be from November 1st, 2024 through October 31st of 2025. The new price would be $3.491 per decatherm, and the savings would be $18,000 approximately.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the membership? Mr. Reinhardt.
Yes, I wanted to ask if Direct Energy was the only bidder on this contract?
They're actually the approved vendor through the MEGA program. So that's how we secured their services. So this would be an extension really of the services they have been providing for a number of years.
So does that mean as the preferred vendor, they're the only ones that are giving quotes?
They're the only ones that are authorized. I think they're the only person on the list for gas for our area, I believe.
What is the benefit of that? I don't like this idea of only having one quote. I think it does not make sense to do that. Even though Mega is a nonprofit, I ran into the same problem with Mega when we were trying to launch the community choice aggregation. And I frankly was dumbfounded when I found out after telling the public they were going to go do multiple quotes for the pricing, they only did one. It wasn't Direct Energy, but I'm seeing the same pattern here. And I don't understand why we do this. We're not, we're saving money, yes, but how much more might we save if we actually had competitive bidding?
Well, it's my understanding that Mega basically secures the bids and Direct Energy was the selected vendor through that program. I can certainly, reach out to Mega and see, what their procurement process is on their end, if that's something.
Well, I really want to know that because often when we look at these numbers that come in on projects, we see the competitive bids, like some of the other projects that I'm looking at tonight. I didn't see any other quotes. And I thought, well, does this mean that the preferred vendor is the only one who's giving a quote? Because I just don't think that's good practice.
No, that's a valid point. Like I said, my understanding is that Mega basically does the procurement and the selection of those firms. But again, the county has historically used that program for the selection of their suppliers. But that's certainly something I can certainly look into and report back to you on.
I just have one last question. Under municipal law, are we required to get multiple quotes?
Well, this has been vetted through purchasing. And again, I think through the program that we're utilizing, that has been vetted out to be a legal avenue.
I remain to be convinced that this is a good practice. I really think we could have saved more money potentially. We'll never know how much more we might have saved with the way the fossil markets are going if we'd gotten multiple quotes.
Yeah, I think it's difficult with the commodity markets because of how you have to hedge those as well. It becomes difficult to bid those and secure those accounts because of how frequently they have to be hedged. Daily or weekly hedging for those pricing. So it becomes difficult to actually go out to bid and kind of lock in a rate if in fact it is low at the time of the bid versus when you're securing the contracts. But your point, you raise a good point. I will certainly look into the Mega program and see if I can get you some information on how those services are secured.
Yeah, I think we're perhaps missing an opportunity here to save more money.
Mr. O'Brien. Sorry, Mr. Bergdorf. Sorry. Yeah, the two of you are like twins sometimes.
I sort of had the same question, but really coming at it from a different angle. When you get a gas quote, how old is this quote when you got the price for natural gas for county facilities?
Well, what happens is generally we'll have to secure the hedge. So I'd have to go back and look at the email as to when we actually were quoted, but this is going back probably at least a month or better. I'd have to go back and check email dates.
Well, I guess the point I was going to make is that it appears that energy prices have been heading north over the past month. Anybody who's filled their car and watched some of the policy changes. So what I want to make sure is that if that continues to happen, is the price that we have here, does it float on any basis, or is it guaranteed for the term of the contract?
The price that we are presenting here tonight is fixed and locked in.
Well, in that instance, I think that's probably a good thing, given the trajectory of energy prices today. So I'm glad to hear that this was secured a month ago and that there's a substantial savings to the county.
And we're not in Texas.
We're not.
All right. Mr. Riley, do you wish to say something?
No, I just wanted to jump in because I just looked at the emails Angelo was referring to. He recommended that we lock this price on January 26th. So it's just exactly 4 weeks old.
Okay.
Just one last thing to Mr. Reinhardt's point. We will certainly reach out to Mega about their procurement process, but they do competitive procurement similar to the way that the county would. It's just that because they're an aggregation, they have greater buying power. So I'm not contesting your point, but I don't want, again, we'll confirm, but I don't want it, to imply that there isn't any sort of competitive RFP process.
I just think that if they are aggregating and then getting quotes, that only speaks to the point that there might be more than one company interested in quoting. the price.
Yeah, and we'll confirm how many bids they received for their natural gas
All right.
contract
Thank
when it
you.
was let.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bergdorf, second by Mr. O'Brien. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. All right, that carries. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to item 5, which is authorizing the submission of a grant application to the New York State Council on the Arts regarding the facilities upgrades at the Shaker Heritage Site, a place near and dear to a lot of our hearts.
Hi, thank you, everyone. My name is Johanna Batman. I'm director of Shaker Heritage Society. And so we aspire to apply for this facilities grant, which would be for work to be completed in fiscal year 22. And it's a matching grant of up to $49,500, and it would fund some required facility upgrades to the 1848 Meeting House. Our HVAC system is about 30 years old in certain components and will need to be replaced soon. And I'm looking at other energy efficiency measures that we can undertake to kind of improve the climate control and long-term preservation of the building. I'm happy to answer questions.
Gotcha. This is one of the grants that is now possible due to the lease that was extended. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Any questions from the membership?
Quick question,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Bergdorf.
Yeah, it's actually for Dave Riley. Dave, assuming that this is a 50% grant, do we have this covered in the budget or in the capital plan, or where is the 50% county match coming from?
It actually should be in the backup here. Hold on, it is a budgeted amount. It's not in the capital plan.
Okay.
This particular grant, we would be raising the matching funds. The county would not be responsible.
Oh, okay. Well, that's even better.
You won't put it in the budget.
Thank you for correcting me.
No, I apologize if I filled out the form incorrectly.
Well, thank
All
you.
right.
No.
Any other questions?
I guess I do have a question.
Mr. Reinhardt.
I apologize. I probably, if I'd been a little more careful, I might have read this somewhere in here, but are you looking at air source heat pumps or geothermal heating and cooling of this building as part of the retrofit, or are you not looking to replace your existing HVAC hardware?
We are looking at both options right now. So basically where we started was the kind of low end would be just replacing the current air handler forced air system that we have in place. So we don't have cooling in the building currently. The second tier option, which we're also considering, would be the air source pump, which would add cooling, which would be very beneficial during certain kind of hot and sticky months of the summertime. The geothermal, that we've joked is that if someone walks along and offers us $2 million, we would consider that. But there are also so many utilities crisscrossing that property that I'd question whether we could find an appropriate spot. So that's kind of pie in the sky. So.
Well, you might want to have somebody just look at it, because somebody who knows what they're doing in that space could easily tell whether, like essentially drilling a well versus a horizontal loop system could be feasible. And my thought is simply that as a tourist site, it would be a great place to demonstrate new, innovative, low carbon technology. It would be a plum for the county to be involved in something like that, as it would be for the Shaker Society. And it would be very highly visible. So there'd probably be grant money available to implement some of these innovative things if in fact it looked like it might be technically feasible.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think there's a certain time crunch for this right now, just because of the HVAC system and my concern about its viability long-term. But we do have 8 other buildings on the property that eventually I would like also to have, running HVAC year round. And that, that is absolutely something that I want to pursue. But I can speak, we're working with Landmark Facilities Group on this project right now, which is a firm out of Connecticut. So I can talk to them a little bit more about what our options might be and what the kind of rough estimates would be, so that we can kind of lay that groundwork.
Yeah, one last point. Sorry to spend so much time on this, but if you're talking about multiple buildings, the geothermal option is one that is becoming highly exciting for people who deal with university campuses and other multi-building locations, because the economy of scale that you get with the geothermal is very compelling, and it can justify the various costs associated, which are more than, you know, what we're used to when it comes to HVAC.
Thank you.
But you get great efficiency is really my point.
All right, Mr. Fine.
I just want to second what Bill said. I think that we should be doing whatever we can to invest in geothermal energy and clean and renewable energies in general.
Point well taken. Any other questions from the members? Mr. Peter.
No other questions. I'd like to make a motion.
A motion by Mr. Peter, seconded by Mr. O'Brien. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Batman.
Thank you.
That carries. Let's go. Last two items. The first is item number 6, authorizing agreements with the Affordable Housing Partnerships and Plug-in Solutions Online LLC for the purchase, installation, and maintenance of electric vehicle charging stations.
Thank you, and good evening, folks. The county was approached by the Affordable Housing Partnership, who received a NYSERDA grant to install charging stations in low-income neighborhoods in the region. And they expressed interest in installing a station at the complex where our mental health, and Board of Elections is located. We certainly welcomed that opportunity and are looking to partner with them. It requires a memorandum of understanding, which a draft of which is attached. The result would be 2 public charging stations for members of the public when it becomes a thing again, to be able to visit our mental health, and Board of Elections, as well as we had 1 remaining charging station that was procured by a previous grant, but we weren't able to install due to the prohibitively high cost of the installation. And the vendor is willing to use the grant funding to also install that station, which is a fleet station that would allow us to put one of our electric vehicles down at that complex to be used by either health or mental health. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Reinhardt.
I like the idea, so I'm not going to be critical of anything here, but I do have a question about, I wasn't clear on the costs. It looks like net of National Grid expenditures. At one point, it looks like there's a balance of 11.7 thousand, and the other, there's a balance of 16.7. It's on Schedule B. I wasn't clear. Can you explain, Lucas, why the difference in the numbers?
Yeah, give me a second to pull that up. The National Grid incentive is, I believe, covers 14,029.50. So the remaining, or the net, is 11,730.50, which is then covered by the grant. So there's 2 funding streams, neither in that for the bulk of the project, neither of which are county. The Make Ready, which is a National Grid program, which covers basically anything up to the station. And then the station and the installation is covered by the grant that was received by the Affordable Housing Partnership. Does that answer your question?
Well, there one of those charts in Schedule B shows 16.5 balance of that's being covered somewhere else. And it just seemed like in one place it says 11.7, the others it's 16.5. I know that's not big money based on the kind of things we talk about, but it's still, it seemed like it was an inconsistency, and I was just wondering why that might be.
I see a hand from Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are these free to use once they're up and running, or is the customer charged?
In general, practices vary. I think that some areas, the first 30 minutes will be free, for example, or something in that range. And then after that, the customer begins to incur a charge. I think we'll evaluate that as we go forward.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bergdorf. Yep.
Yeah, that was sort of my question as well. As I do not have an electric vehicle, but I've talked to a lot of people that have them, and the facilities as they become available are being operated under two models: a pay-as-you-go basis. Obviously, what are there? There are going to be three of these, right? One for fleet and two for the public.
That's correct.
Okay. Obviously, the fleet is a legitimate cost for Albany County because you would be using some other alternative fuel for the vehicle. But I think we ought to, take a look at what the best practices and which way the industry is going for free charge time versus unlimited charge time. One of the problems that I have heard of is people going to one of these facilities and plugging their car in and then disappearing for a couple of hours. And
Sure.
that's problematic.
Yeah, and one way that that's been addressed in other instances is to have an escalating price schedule so that, like I said, say you want to incentivize electric vehicles and the first 30 minutes is free. Well, the next 30 minutes is, relatively cheap, covers your electricity output. Next hour scales up a little bit, but still, not outrageous. But as you go each hour, you can increase it to disincentivize that sort of long-term use that may not be directly in line with the intent of us installing the stations there.
Well, I mean, even for employees of the facility, you don't want people going to those stations and parking there plugged in for an 8-hour day, I would think, and not having the station available for other people who are may be of a more transient nature using those facilities.
That is correct.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Peter.
Thank you. Just so I would advise maybe just looking at what NYPA typically does in their stations, and the ones that we both install for NYPA that the parking authority, for example, has versus the ones that are public. We usually charge per kilowatt hour, which at least allows you to make sure that you're covering your electricity costs. And sometimes there's a surcharge that can go into a reserve fund for repairs and stuff like that. I would also, to Mr. Bergdorf's point, have signage there that either has a limit and also clarifies that only electric cars can be there and they can only be parked while charging. And I just would advise that. But I think either a flat fee per hour of charging or a kilowatt hour is typically what we're looking at. That ends up being about anywhere from 25 to 50 cents an hour, which means that a full charge would be $4 thereabouts. So, just a thought, and it will also help it be sustainable moving forward.
Yeah, a lot of those are best practices that I think you've seen picked up in other municipalities or private installations, and it's all under consideration.
I'll say that for that we have these charging terminals over at the Colony Center Mall in my district, and we've certainly seen that that's become a kind of tourist thing as well. That people who are traveling on long distance road trips, say from New York up to the mountains to our north, they'll plan a stop at that mall, have it charged, and then do their shopping, spend their sales tax, and then keep on going. So I think that it's also a fascinating tool on that regard as well.
Good point. And I think, just to respond quickly, I think institutions like that, as more funding becomes available for the fast charge stations, where you can get a really significant charge in 30 minutes, you're going to see, a mall, for example, that's thinking that way, where, okay, this person only needs to kill 30 minutes. We have a coffee shop here. We have some some other amenities. And it does become sort of a small but a meaningful economic development measure.
Yeah, and certainly as we're thinking about the more urban areas where we're trying to attract foot traffic and tourism, I think that can be a quite effective technique. See, Mr. Grimm is trying to get into the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think we should be charging people using the energy. First of all, it's not mean tested. It's rich people could be loading up on the electricity at no charge to them. That's just not right. But also, we're for energy conservation. If you give something away for free, obviously there's less incentive to conserve. And what we all should be doing is conserving as much energy as we can. So we certainly should be charging from the first minute for people using energy, because for the reasons I just enumerated.
Seems a little bit, I'll jump in again. I think that there's probably a false equivalency between like the gasoline consumption and power that, even if they were to take the power, there are clean sources of that, that can be used. And I think we can still have a net benefit results where more tourism dollars are coming in, cleaner environment with less pollution. And, I think that all that can be accomplished. And I think there's a ton of these positive externalities that can happen. Whereas it might not.
Electricity doesn't come out of the sky. Where does it come from? It comes from nuclear, or it comes from coal. So those are the things, that people are trying to limit. The fact of the matter is, if everybody had an electric car, we'd be in a real bind as to where the electricity would come from. So we have to think in terms of what the source of electricity is first.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bergdorf.
It seems like Matt Peter has been through this before on behalf of the Albany Parking Authority. And they are a municipal subdivision or a public authority. And if they start with a charging by the kilowatt hour or time, I think that makes a certain degree of sense, especially if, a full charge is $4 to get someone to have to pay $1.25 for the 45 minutes they're at the county complex is not the end of the world, because someone's driving by definition a $40,000 car or better. So, I think we ought to look at making this as close to a break even and not I don't want to use the term giveaway, but a subsidized program. My 2 cents.
I see Mr. Peter. Sorry, Mr. Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Bruschi. Yeah, I think that it is a worthy investment to be offering people the ability to charge for free, because then we're encouraging the use of electric cars. The more charging stations that are available, especially if they're free or low cost, the more people buy electric cars, and the less carbon emissions that we'll put into the atmosphere. So, I understand Mr. Grimm's point, Mr. Bergdorf's point, but if it's a reasonable cost to the county, I think it is a worthy investment.
Mr. Cleary, and then we'll get Mr. Peter.
I would agree what Mr. Peters said, and then backed up that, we should recover our cost on it, and it's not a great cost to the consumer. I know, like when you said they went to the mall and stuff, they generated other things, but I would be in favor of recouping the cost as Mr. Peters described. Thank you.
And Mr. Peter.
Yeah, and I just want to close out on that because, we should be doing everything we can to make sure that individuals with electric vehicles can charge it as a reasonable amount. But in the same way that if we put like someplace where the public could get gas, they would pay for that. They should also have to pay for their basic use. And it also helps us be more sustainable moving forward, because if every time we install a station, there's also a net loss per month on the electricity, it actually makes it harder to expand the system. Well, if we build in our cost and still make sure that it's cheap and relatively available to the public, it's going to make it easier for us to expand electric charging stations. And I think that's what we're all after. So, obviously we want to keep it reasonable, but we don't want to lose money by encouraging it. And I think we're subsidizing it in general by putting the charging stations there, and which is certainly what we want to do. But we want to make sure that it's sustainable.
Gotcha. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
By Mr.
Second.
Peter, second by Mr. Reinhardt. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. And that carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, for our last item of the day, number 7 is authorizing the submission of the authorization of the submission of interconnection applications to National Grid regarding 3 potential solar sites in Albany County.
Thank you, Chairman. That's me again. As you indicated from the title, we're requesting authorization to allow Siemens to file interconnection agreements to the utility on behalf of the county. We, utilizing the New York Power Authority's program for municipal solar, conducted a bid. Siemens was the selected vendor. And the first step in this process for these sites is interconnection. So this will be a multi-step process. You'll be seeing me again on this project, but because of the length of time that the interconnection process takes, it makes sense to initiate the interconnection and then in parallel begin working on the seeker, the more advanced design, and moving towards an agreement on a power purchase agreement for at which point the county would actually be locking into agreements for the development of solar at these sites. So again, this is step 1, but wanted to bring it before you and answer any questions that you have.
Mr. Reinhardt and then Mr. Bergdorf.
Yeah, my question, Luke, has to do basically with what are we actually looking at here? Are we looking at solar that would be providing power just to the facilities at each of these sites, or is it more like we're looking at community solar projects where there may be production beyond the needs of the site itself?
So somewhere in between. So it's not community solar in this case, but it is not behind the meter directly feeding a facility at the site. It's in front of the meter. It's an in front of the meter power purchase agreement for offsetting county electric bills.
All right. So you're talking about you would have the county would be the off taker, but it could be to multiple meters in
Correct.
the county system, which is basically what Bethlehem did several years ago when I was on the town board there. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. The bigger, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Mr. Bergdorf.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I have a question for you, Luke. Nowhere we're authorizing Siemens to do something, yet how are they compensated for their effort? I don't see anything anywhere in this backup that talks about what Siemens' role is or compensation, or are they paid for by someone else? Is NYPA, NYSERDA? Who's compensating Siemens?
It's a good question. So the way it kind of works with the PPA certainly is a little bit different than, say, if this were a bridge project where you would conduct a bid, bring it to the legislature, and then immediately execute a contract that laid these things out. There is some pre-development work that Siemens is doing that would be factored into the eventual power purchase agreement that we would begin negotiating that with them in the near future once this agreement is, or this action is authorized. And that is where those costs would be captured into the overall project cost. So what that means, and I think what you're getting at, is the vendor, does take some small risk in the work that they're doing right now on behalf of this project. And, when that is recaptured, when they enter into a power purchase agreement, which, we would expect to come, I don't want to put a date on it, but in the coming months, back to the legislature.
Okay, so basically, whatever Siemens does and whatever gets negotiated gets amortized over the length of the power purchase contract?
I think that's fairly good way to describe it.
Well, I mean, in the construction industry, and many times your architect, engineering, and your construction inspection fees become part of the overall project cost and are reimbursed out of the proceeds of the project. So, who did you say selected Siemens, or are they? How are they selected?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, we went through NYPA's clean energy program, and what they do, we entered into the agreements with NYPA, the MCRA, which is the overall agreement, and then a specific agreement relative to this project. They issued the RFP, so it's a NYPA RFP.
Okay, so it's like a mini bid.
It is. Now, they included, their practice is to include 2 to 3 people who are the technical experts from NYPA to weigh in, and then they also included representatives from the county, because obviously we bring a perspective in grading the bids of the county's specific interests. So it was jointly reviewed by that group and then awarded by the Power Authority.
Okay, so we still don't have any sense as to order of magnitude of what these services will cost, or do?
Well, so we do the way that you have to think about it with a PPA. You're comparing the PPA rate that we would pay the developer for the power, and that, as you explained, incorporates the costs associated with the project relative to, and this was in the last couple of years change at the state level, what's called the value of distributed energy resources, and that's how the state credits the production of renewable power into the grid. So based on where you are in the state, based, vis-a-vis supply constraints, based on what time of day it is, that determines your credits. And so what we've done is a VEDR analysis that looks at, these are the projects that are most cost competitive, where over the length of the project, the reimbursement through that VEDR is equal to, greater than, or very close in that range to what we're paying through the power purchase agreement, so that it's a cost positive, for lack of a better term, long-term project for the county. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mr. Miller.
I just had a quick question. I appreciate it, Mr. Bursky. And it might be for our staff. In the backup documents in the committee, the application process document indicates it's about 37 pages long. We only have 8. Did that get cut off or something? 'Cause some of the stuff we're talking about here is covered in those later pages, and we don't have it. Can we just get that checked out?
We'll look into that and find out if there is more, we will upload it for you.
Yeah, because some of that stuff we're talking about, the payment and the milestones and all that, is in these subsequent pages. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bursky.
No problem. Any other, can I get a motion from the members?
Motion, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Peter, second by Mr. Reinhardt. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. And seeing none, that carries unanimously. All right, that concludes our agenda for the day. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion, Mr. Chair.
By Mr. Peter, Seconded by
Mr. Cleary.
Mr. Cleary. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. That's it. Thank you very much for coming out today. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.